the ship the last couple of days. We are here now on a Wednesday DRS together for the next 3 hours up until 11 a.m. Eastern time. 11 days out from Selection Sunday in college basketball. Conference tournaments at the mid-major level already underway, and we have already seen chaos. Hello, A-Sun tournament. We saw chaos yesterday in the association as well. So much to get to here over these 3 hours live on the early line.
So much for home court advantage in some of these conference tournaments already, but it's nice where I don't have to roll through the 7-7 all by myself. I got my pal back in the seat here. We got 3 hours to get after it. Monster college basketball card. Taking a look at the NBA slate tonight. Tag season, Ben, is over. There's a lot of hot topics on this Wednesday to get through today for us.
That franchise tag window coming to a close yesterday at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We'll tell you the 9 players who were tagged around the National Football League, and maybe more importantly, who escaped the tag and gets to test the open market. The hottest team in the NBA, the best team in the NBA, in action last night in Cleveland with the Kelsey brothers in attendance. The Boston Celtics, who had won 11 consecutive games, took that 11-game win streak on the road last night to the land against the Cavs. But despite having a 22-point lead early in the fourth quarter, the 11-game win streak comes to a close. Boston goes down to Cleveland yesterday as we welcome in our SportsGrid radio audience. Live right here in hour number 1 of a Wednesday on the early line on SportsGrid. He is Donnie, I am Ben. You are listening on Sirius XM Channel 159. All of our radio terrestrial affiliates now in the fold as well. The win streak for Boston ends at 11 as Cleveland rallies all the way back from down 22 points with just 9 minutes remaining in regulation to win 105-104. The game we will forever know as the Dean Wade game in the land. He scored 20 points alone in the fourth quarter to leave the Cavs to a come-from-behind victory.
Yeah, that's not Dwayne Wade. That's Dean Wade last night coming up big there for the Cleveland Cavaliers. 105-104, a massive victory because it looked like, as you said, Ben, this game was dead to rights over the Boston Celtics with yet another victory, but a great comeback also without Spider Mitchell here for the Cavaliers. Maybe this propels them down the stretch here as one of those wins you'll look back on, which sort of set that sail for, okay, maybe we can be a player in the Eastern Conference. Big win by the Cavaliers coming back with that fourth quarter.
The Cavs get to that 40-win benchmark. Dean Wade scored 20 points in the fourth quarter alone in his 4 NBA seasons out of Kansas State entering last night. He had 3 career 20-point games. He scored 20 in the fourth as Cleveland comes all the way back to snap Boston's 11-game win streak. More from that game in just a little bit. Now we go to overtime up in Denver. That mile-high advantage for the Nugs, not the case in the extra session. After Phoenix, Donnie, only scored 12 points in the fourth quarter. So Denver evened it up heading in or at the end of regulation. After only 12 points for Phoenix in the fourth and final quarter, they score 15 in overtime, led by Kevin Durant in a 10-point victory margin. 117-107. Phoenix victorious last night at altitude.
Phoenix was money from the three-point line, Ben, here, 44% as a team. We take a look at Kevin Durant shooting 34 times in this ballgame, coming up with 35 points. Wasn't really efficient here, but you know who helped out? Grayson Allen played 41 minutes, 9 of 15 from the field, but that included 8 of 12 from three-point range for a 28-point effort. They almost blew that game here, but were able to rescue it in overtime. That's a big win for the Suns. Once again, Ben, as we wait to see if the Big Three is going to finally join each other on the court for the Suns.
The Big Three in action last night for Phoenix. 34 shots for KD, 35 points, but did find better efficiency in overtime. From the NBA to men's college basketball. Top 15 tilt in Champaign last night between 3rd-ranked Purdue and 12th-ranked Illinois, and it was electric at the State Farm Center. But Purdue shows its muscle once again, winning outright 77-71, booked as an underdog for just the second time this season. The Boilermakers have won outright in both games as a dog. Braden Smith, the man you are about to see on your screen, there he is, the dagger, under 20 seconds remaining in regulation as Purdue wins its second consecutive Big Ten regular season championship outright.
I got a lot right yesterday, Ben. This was one I got wrong, and quite frankly, I was feeling pretty confident about this one at the break, 40-34. Illinois at home. Very good basketball team here. Terrence Shannon Jr. back. I believe in the last 12 games, they've won 9 of those, including being perfect on their home court, but it wasn't enough. Zach Edey, 28 points, clutch shots down the stretch. And I know you're not supposed to do this. It's a regular season game, and yes, you got to win 6 games in March Madness to cut down the nets. But the Purdue Boilermakers showed me a lot. Like, Donnie, they're a top 3 team already. What do you mean they showed you a lot? That was a game I thought they had to win and got it. Same thing with Illinois, who might have taken that next step as, you know what? Can they be contenders? Put them a little bit at bay in that game. That was a great Big Ten basketball game last night, no doubt about it.
Total of 164.5. Illinois had gone over in 9 straight games. It stays under last night in Champaign. We did see an over in Gainesville, and the total was lofty to begin, 105-87. The victory for Florida over Alabama, going over 176.5. A big victory for the Florida Gators, who have covered in 4 of their last 5 games as a single-digit favorite. They were booked as the 2.5-point home favorite, the unranked side getting a victory and a cover over the ranked Crimson Tide.
Yeah, tempo and a breakneck pace certainly not working out for Alabama, now dropping to 20-10 on the season. Still a quality SEC slate at 12-5 overall, but this is a game I nailed yesterday. The favorite opening up as Alabama switching over to the Florida Gators. They were the better team from jump to finish and also scoring 61 points in the second half here. Alabama, play some D out there. Come on.
They certainly do not play any defense. Alabama has now lost 2 straight where they have not scored more than 95 points. Huge for Tennessee and South Carolina, who will face off tonight. Tennessee has a great opportunity to clinch the SEC with a victory this evening. Franchise tag deadline coming to a close. 9 players tag. We'll break down who some of those names are, like Brian Burns for Carolina. But none of the running backs tagged yesterday at the end of the tag window.
Teams have a lot of money to spend, apparently not on the running back position, Ben, and we're going to have some fun in free agency to see where some of these really good backs go.
Some names like Josh Allen, Antoine Winfield Jr., we will talk all about it in just a little bit. The Seahawks making some moves ahead of the franchise tag deadline as well, letting go of both of their starting safeties from a year ago, Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, to save nearly $34 million of cap space.
Look, you're not spending $34 million on a bunch of slow safeties. New coordinator in there, which is the head coach. He wants to put his own guys in place there, Ben. No surprises here.
DRS, the Boston Red Sox did not do many things this offseason. They did add Lucas Giolito. He was going to anchor that starting staff. He might miss the entirety of this regular season before it even gets underway in MLB. More around the association up next here on the Early Line. The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like
This is
a guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to
Penn
find
State's
a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But
Right.
if we make them a third,
They get in.
this
is
they're
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
And that 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The Books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Around the association we go, from a 9-game slate in the NBA on a Tuesday night, live right here on a Wednesday morning on the early line on SportsGrid. We had an 11-game win streak at stake last night for the Boston Celtics as the C's went into Cleveland against the Cavaliers. Booked as an 8-point road favorite, they had covered in the last 5 games in the 11-game win streak and up by 22. With 9 minutes remaining in regulation, it seemed easy, DRS, that Boston would win 12 in a row and more than likely cover for the 6th consecutive game. But enter Dean Wade. Dean Wade, the 4th-year NBA pro out of Kansas State, who entering last night had scored 3 career games of 20-plus points, scored 20 in the 4th quarter for the Cavaliers as the Cavs come all the way back to win outright 105-104 last night in the land.
Stays under the total, too. And we were talking about it yesterday.
Crazy.
You're trying to set this basketball game up, and you know it's not going to be a good thing for the Cleveland Cavaliers if the Boston Celtics do whatever they want on offense, which means you're going to have a higher tempo game. That's the way it started last night, too, Ben. 33-25 at the end of the first quarter looked like another easy win for the Boston Celtics. And also, they were full gas in that starting lineup. Tatum, 38 minutes. Porzingis, 32. Holiday, 36. White, 35. And Brown, 37. They didn't shoot particularly well, just coming in just under 42% from the three-point line. They were fine. Right around 40% as a team, but also in a game that's usually a slugfest, 105-104. It's probably like, oh, it's an ugly game, a lot of free throw attempts. That wasn't the case. Only 12 total attempts here for the Boston Celtics, 11 total attempts for the Cleveland Cavaliers. This game looked like it was going to be put away with an easy Celtics victory until the 4th quarter happened. 34-17 final of that 4th quarter, which Cleveland won going away. That's a nice win for the Cavaliers. A shocking defeat for the Boston Celtics, who we were joking at. Will they even lose another game down the stretch here? It felt like they were running so hot, but certainly sometimes you get a little bit of bad breaks here. The call at the end of the game overturned, and away you go with the Cleveland Cavaliers W.
A team-high 23 points for Dean Wade. And again, no Spider last night. No Donovan Mitchell, no Evan Mobley for Cleveland, and yet they muster up the rally in the 4th quarter. They were down by 22 with 9 minutes remaining. In the next 8 minutes or so, a little bit less than that, in fact, about 7.5 minutes, Cleveland went on a 32-6 run to take a 4-point lead in the final minute and 40. That was how drastic the comeback effort was. Jason Tatum, a double-double for Boston last night, a game-high 26 points and 13 boards. Kristaps Porzingis scored 24. Jaylen Brown scored 21. All the makings for Boston to win its 12th consecutive game, except for that Cleveland comeback. The Cavs now 10-9 against the spread this year as an underdog, winning outright as an 8-point dog. 9 of those 10 covers an outright victory. Cleveland gets to the 40-win benchmark, now 40-21, third best mark in the Eastern Conference. A half game behind Milwaukee, who now has the longest active win streak in the Eastern Conference, 6 in a row. They are still 7.5 games, though, behind the Boston Celtics, 48-13, still the mark for the C's.
Yeah, exactly. And we're expecting still big things from the Celtics. You're going to lose sometimes here. Maybe it'd be alarming if they lost by 20 points to an undermanned Cleveland Cavaliers team. But moving down the stretch, we're not losing any faith there. They're going to win the Eastern Conference, from my opinion, and also easily get that number 1 overall seed in the East heading into the playoffs. But it will be fun because we do think we are turning that tide here for Milwaukee as a team that's like, you know what? We don't even need Giannis now and we can win basketball games. So we'll see what they have down the stretch. But this is certainly the class of the East, no doubt about that.
Yeah, still that is the case for Boston. Now we go out to the Western Conference. The Denver Nuggets hosting the Phoenix Suns last night. The Nugs booked as an 8.5-point home favorite, where throughout this season in Denver at altitude, they had been sensational. 24-5 entering last night. Booked as a favorite in all 29 games, 14-14-1 against the spread. They were down by 15 at the break. They rally in the third and fourth quarters. Phoenix only scores 12 total points in the fourth and final quarter. Because of the Nuggets' rally, DRS, it sends it into overtime, where Kevin Durant and Phoenix woke up. They scored 15 points in OT, 3 more points than they scored in all of the fourth to win by 10, 117-107. The Suns win outright as an 8.5-point road underdog.
This is the Suns teasing us right now, right? Because if we take a look and thinking that the Denver Nuggets are the best team overall in the West, and the FanDuel Sportsbook right now has them as the favorites to win the West, this is a great performance. A double-digit win on the road where you had a double-digit lead and you blew it and just didn't say, you know what? We gave it a good try here overtime. Not going to be us. We're going to be gassed out here because it's elevation and we're playing in overtime. They win that overtime 15-5, completely reversing that fourth quarter, which they only scored 12 points, as you pointed out. And even in an effort with Kevin Durant, who played 44 minutes, wasn't efficient at all. Bradley Beal, 6 of 18 from the floor, not efficient at all. But also, this is the reason why you got guys like Grayson Allen, who quite frankly was in the starting lineup last night and played 41 minutes. This is what gives you hope, because hopefully Grayson Allen is coming off the bench, giving you type of performances, scoring 28 points in the playoffs here. But this gives you hope, and maybe it's just some false hope here. The Suns can be a really good team, and the key word there, Ben, can.
You looked at the box score last night, and you just look at the points totals, and you probably think, oh, Devin Booker, 28 points. Way to go to have the second most on Phoenix besides Kevin Durant. No, that's Grayson Allen, 8 triples last night, a huge game, because Kevin Durant did score 35, but was 14 of 34 from the field. Better in overtime, where he did most of his damage, but not the most efficient game of KD's career. On the other side, 25 and 16 for Nikola Jokic. Michael Porter Jr. pours in 20. Jamal Murray, a team-high 28 points. Boston was the hottest team in the NBA, winners of 11 straight entering last night. The Nuggets, the hottest team out west. They won 6 in a row. That comes to a close as well. Phoenix as an underdog now this year, 7-9 against the spread, 6 of those 7 covers, an outright victory. Even in overtime, the total of 224 does push. Phoenix under in 7 of its previous 8 games. The Mavericks at home last night got a 39-point triple-double out of Luka Doncic. Kyrie Irving scored 23 points as well. That's 62 combined, but 9 players, 9 on Indiana, scored in double digits, including 5 off the bench. An incredibly balanced night for the Pacers on the road in Dallas. They win by 17, 137-120. The Pacers winning outright, DRS, as a 5-point road dog.
Yeah, it just feels like you want to throw the towel on the Dallas Mavericks on the season. Now, it's not because they don't have great players, because they have 2 great players, but just in that stacked West, they just seem to be slipping here. And again, you can point to him by saying, well, you need Luka Doncic to step up. How many nights have we seen it so far? 30-point triple-doubles, which included last night. 39, 11, and 10, and they get blown out on their home court. And also, efficiency. 50% shooting here from Luka Doncic. 8 of 19 from the floor for Kyrie, which isn't that bad, and yet you still got blown away. It just felt like when they made that move for Kyrie, it was like, you know what? We have our 2 superstar players. Can we build a bench enough around them to be a great supporting cast? We don't have that, because on a night-to-night basis, both of those guys are balling, Ben, and they're still not winning basketball games. Having said that, they're 34-28. They're going to be in the playoffs. But is anybody looking forward to the Mavericks as one of those teams like, hey, let's get into the playoffs and do a lot of damage here? It's certainly not me at this point. In games like that against the Pacers on your home court and on your home court against the Philadelphia 76ers, losing those ball games, you can't trust this Mavs squad.
You certainly cannot trust this Mavericks team. Indiana, meanwhile, as an underdog, 19-13-2 against the spread, even 500 straight up, 17-17. Dallas now has lost 5 of its last 6 games. The Pacers had gone under in 3 straight. That's blasphemy in Indianapolis over last night, even with a lofty total at 246.5. No Jalen Brunson. And some issues for the New York Knicks now down the stretch. A 3-point home favorite last night inside Madison Square Garden against the worst cover team in the NBA. That's Atlanta. And the Hawks win outright by 16, Donnie. 116-100 inside MSG.
I mean, we were hoping to get like Jalen Brunson matching up against Trae Young, but instead we got Bogdanovich versus Bogdanovich last night. And the Bogdanovich from the Atlanta Hawks was the superior team here, 116-100. By the way, that first quarter, 33-15. Get out of town. The Knicks were dead and buried right after quarter number 1, Ben.
They certainly were. 116-100 goes slightly over a total of 214.5. New York now has dropped 8 of its last 13 games. We go to college basketball up next, live right here on the early line. The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like we're repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The early line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
This is
the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that lightning in a bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
We enter the zone just over a week and a half away from Selection Sunday when the NCAA tournament field will be revealed. And last night felt like a tournament night in Champaign, Illinois, a top 15 tilt between third-ranked Purdue on the road, one victory away from an outright Big Ten title for the second consecutive year against an Illinois team that was booked as the favorites at home, ranked 12th in the country. For the opening half, Illinois looked like the right side, up by 6 at the break, 40-34. But what is the mark of a champion? What is the mark of a team, Donnie, that will have March define its season once again? Purdue showed that last night. A huge second half, 43-31 the difference. The Boilermakers outscore Illinois by 12. They win the basketball game outright as an underdog for just the second time this season, 77-71. A 2.5-point underdog. The Boilers win outright. Purdue wins an outright Big Ten title in the regular season for a second straight season.
Yeah, the FanDuel Sportsbook opened up Purdue as a 1.5-point favorite. And by game time, as you pointed out, we're a 2.5-point underdog. Now, I liked the Fighting Illini earlier in the day yesterday. I said, you know what, I'll take that minus 1.5. I think this is a showcase game for Illinois at home. They should put up or shut up in this game. But if you're going to be the Purdue Boilermakers, and this is where you start to gain that momentum and steam heading into March Madness, because you're not playing at home. They're not comfortable environments. Yeah. They're new opponents here. They're quality opponents. And you got to win 6 straight games, which hasn't worked out in their favor over the past couple years here with quality teams. But if you are Purdue and you say, you know what, I'm going to face an Illinois team that's really good right now and shoot close to 50% as a team from the floor on the road, you'll take that. But how about 3-point range here? 56%. Yep. Do you know what that means? 9 of 16 from the floor. Everybody collapses down on Zach Edey. If you are making your open shots, it can be an absolutely deadly offense. And also, it wasn't as if like, hey, the game plan here for the Fighting Illini is going to be, you know what? Let's just take away Zach Edey. You know you can't do that. He played 36 minutes, shot 23 times, and ended up with 28 points here. That was a great performance overall for Purdue. And also keep in mind, this wasn't one like, hey, Purdue was on it right away, Ben. They had the lead all the way through and held on to the end. No, like they were down at the break, had to charge in the second half. Make those clutch basketball shots here. It's one of those games where you look back to and say, you know what? On those top lines that we're looking at betting to see who's going to win March Madness here, maybe Purdue gets a bump from games like this because it makes them more trustable down the stretch.
And one of the things, DRS, that I think the Boilermakers over the past 2 years have struggled with when they have played from behind because the regular season records have been so great, they haven't been in many areas where they have trailed, is they get a little bit hesitant at the guard spot. Can you trust a Braden Smith? Can you trust a Fletcher Lawyer? Are they too reliant on getting the ball inside to Zach Edey? Not last night. 28 points for Edey, 23 field goal attempts. He made 13. Only 4 free throw attempts for the big man, for the Boilermakers. That is not often what we see, an uncommon occurrence to only go to the free throw line 4 times. A great defensive game plan from Brad Underwood and Illinois. But Braden Smith is the difference this year. 3 of 4 from deep, the point guard for the Boilers. That adds it up across each and every stat category, each and every single night in Big Ten play. In a dagger 3 with just under 19 seconds remaining in regulation that gave them the 6-point margin that Purdue won by. And I will say this for Illinois, not a great defensive team. They had gone over in 9 straight games, 13 of their last 14. Last night's total stays under 164.5. Finishes with just 77-71. That's 148 total points. So Purdue wins an outright Big Ten regular season championship for a second consecutive year, plus 160 to accomplish that before this season got underway. And you mentioned DRS, more trustworthy when you get to the big dance in those key moments. Can you come from behind when things aren't working your way in the first 20 minutes? How would that be reflected in the national championship odds? Take 30 cents or 50 cents off the number, Purdue went from plus 750 to 7-1, tied for the second best price behind UConn with Houston.
And rightfully so. They should be there at this point, and they're perfect matches here for March Madness because if you could tell me right now, granted, we're not going to get 50% shooting from the 3-point line in every game in March Madness. That's just not going to happen. But they can be said, you know what? we're not a one-trick pony here. Like, yes, of course we're going to lean on Zach Edey. He's the best player in college basketball. We want the ball in his hands as much as possible. But let's just say he does have an off-night shooting, which, again, last night, he wasn't all that efficient, and you still won against a top 15 program on the road. These are the games that you're going to lean on here. And it's also a team through trials and tribulations. Here's what you don't want to see. They get into that round of 32. They're down 8 at the break. Yep. Oh, no, woe is me at this point here, which you can relate to last night where they were down 6 points at the break. You know what? We can win this thing again, and don't worry about it. It's not going to affect our seed line here. They had a great second half in a tough environment that was jumping in Champaign yesterday, and they won that basketball game. We're not saying Purdue is a must-bet here to win the national championship, but you can't look at it saying like, well, they lost early last year, and 2 years ago they did the same thing. Nonsense at this point. It's a better basketball team that should be learning from their mistakes, and yesterday was a big win down at the break, winning on the road against a top 15 program. I like to see that out of Purdue.
We can highlight everything Purdue has done this year. Now 11 quad 1 victories. That's the most in the country. 17 quad 1 and 2 wins. Again, the most in college basketball. 7 wins against teams ranked in the top 25, tied for the most around the country, so on and so forth. Everybody knows Purdue's season will be defined by its run in the NCAA tournament, not only to change the narrative from a season ago, but for a Boilermakers program that is rich in history but has failed to reach a Final Four since 1980. In my estimation, this team is different. Now we go to the SEC. A huge game last night for the top of the charts in that regular season title race in the Southeastern Conference. Alabama, a 2.5-point underdog on the road in Gainesville against Florida, and that line proved to be correct. Again, the home unranked favorite against a ranked road opponent. It's been a strong trend all year since the calendar turned into February. Now here in March, 105-97, the victory for the Gators. A total of 176.5 still finds its way over. Alabama has dropped 2 in a row. They have not covered in their last 4 games as an underdog. Meanwhile, Florida in their last 6 games in SEC play as a single-digit favorite. They have covered in 5 of 6.
Yeah, by the way, there were some crazy stat lines in this game. You take a look at Walter Clayton Jr., who you thought he'd be Joel Embiid last night. 15 of 16 from the floor? No. 15 of 16 from the free throw line. Take a look at the Florida Gators in that game. They shot 46 free throws and made 40 of those in that victory, getting over 100 points here. You take a look, and it's like, okay, live by the 3, die by the 3. We get it, Alabama, but even if you die by the 3, you can still play some good defense out there. They shot 21% from three-point range, 44% as a team, and even though they shot a great amount of free throws as well, 25, which is usually pretty solid for a college basketball game, and made 20 of those and shot 80% and still didn't win. I don't know how many people are looking forward to the tournaments coming up saying, okay, can Alabama get hot in the SEC conference tournament or maybe even into the big dance? Because if you don't play defense and there's a chance that your three-point shots aren't working, you can have all the tempo you want because, quite frankly, other teams love that. Hey, they can't make a shot, but yet we have the ball in our hands every 25 seconds to score, and we're getting fouled just by taking it to the rack. This is a bad sign here for Alabama, hanging on to a top 20 spot. Ultra talented in a tough conference, but you can't be giving up. It seems like routinely, Ben, 100-plus points on a night-to-night basis. You can't win that way.
They have gone over in 8 of their last 9 games, and these are not totals at 135 or 140. 176.5 finds its way over. That is bad Alabama basketball. They rank 106th now in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. They are the best offense in the country, but we have told you about the splits that you need to win a national championship. Alabama does not have that. No covers in their last 4 games as a dog. That sets the stage for a huge game tonight between Tennessee and South Carolina that could dictate who wins the SEC regular season crown. The Sunflower Showdown for the second time this year after K-State in the Octagon of Doom back in the Little Apple in early February knocked off Kansas. KU trying to return the favor last night at home in Lawrence. An 11.5-point spread for Kansas in their favor, and they made good on the number. A 22-point win, 90-68. The Jayhawks get the revenge.
Yeah, this was a blowout, no doubt about it. I thought this game would get over the total. It was listed in the low 140s. It does crack over that because of 49 points in the second half by Kansas really helped that one. But just take a look at this. Making your free throw shots. Kansas State, 10 of 21 from the free throw line, which is under 50%, which is terrible. But take a look at this for Kansas. This is what you love to see down the stretch. And if you're going to win close games, you got to do this. 28 of 31 from the charity stripe for 90% as a team when they also shot close to 50% from three-point range. You're not going to lose many ball games, particularly at home in the fog. That's a big-time win for Kansas, who started to lose that steam as, hey, can this team actually make a national championship run? Look, Kansas State's not a great team. That was a good win for them in a perfect bounce-back spot. And yes, we did get over the total yesterday for our best bet. So good win all the way around out there in Kansas.
Over 142.5. The Jayhawks entered last night, dropping 4 of their previous 7 games, including that first game in February against K-State. They had not covered in any of the 4 defeats they covered last night. Kevin McCullough Jr., back for Kansas, had 20 points in the road loss in Waco against Baylor, but a good performance, 19 points last night. K-State, one of the stories of last year's Big Dance, has now lost 9 of their last 12 games. Mountain West, watch in a very compact conference. Boise State and Utah State entering last night, tied atop the conference for that first place spot. Last night, San Diego State, a loss against UNLV. The Runnin' Rebs booked as a 2.5-point home favorite. Total stays under. Boise State loses as a 5.5-point home favorite to Nevada by 10. Craziness in the Mountain West. Utah State now sits in first. They're in action on this Wednesday evening. All of the excitement down the home stretch of this regular season in college basketball. Franchise tags next in the NFL. The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The early line, only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
This is the Penn State rule. Be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not one, but two coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
Late
sort of
Night.
has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Yesterday, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, another significant date in the NFL offseason calendar. It was the close of the franchise tag window around the National Football League. Tuesday, March 5th. 9 players around the NFL ended up being tagged. A lot of that flurry coming toward the end of yesterday, including the Baltimore Ravens, tagging defensive lineman Justin Madubuike. Brian Burns, the edge rusher out of Carolina, was tagged as well. Michael Pittman Jr. earlier this week. Antoine Winfield Jr. from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers yesterday afternoon. 9 players in total tagged by their respective clubs around the NFL. So next big date in the calendar for those players under the tag DRS, they have until July 15th to work a long-term contract extension with their NFL organization or play under the tag or hold out into training camp. Those are the big dates in the NFL offseason.
Yeah, and also, we have to take a look at the tag as is, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It's not a finality, right? Like, couldn't come to an agreement. It's March 6th. We just tagged you. No more negotiations. You'll play under a 1-year tag. You have all summer long, all OTAs to get this ready, and we usually see this go sometimes right up to a week before the season starts, which, again, is always a detriment. It very rarely works out in the player's favor. Hey, let me hold out all off season long and just show up at training camp, and 3 weeks later, it's hamstring injuries, it's knee injuries, it's calf injuries. So I never like that situation, but also we have to remind ourselves the cap, goes up $30 million.
Yep.
You're talking about players that are getting tagged where the franchise is telling you you're really too accomplished and too good of a football player for us to let you walk, and then telling them we still don't want to pay you all that much money, but you are really important to us here. So the bad feelings get underway right away. And also particularly, you take a look at the defensive ends. The tag is very expensive for defensive ends, but defensive ends of, let's just say, Brian Burns or Josh Allen, do you think they want to play like a 1-year contract at $24 million when if they actually hit free agency, they would get $100 million in guaranteed money here? So they're not happy they got tagged. None of these players are. They want the long-term deal. But it's funny that sort of dance you have like, yeah, you're not leaving, but we're not paying you, but we love you, right? No, it doesn't work that way. We'll see how it gets settled here. But I'm always interested in tag season where it ends up late. We got a flurry yesterday of guys that got tagged late.
So those are the 6 guys that were tagged yesterday. Michael Pittman Jr. for the Colts, Antoine Winfield Jr. for the Buccaneers, Josh Allen, the edge rusher for Jacksonville, Brian Burns, the very talented edge rusher for Carolina, Jalen Johnson for Chicago, Justin Madubuike for Baltimore. You add in T. Higgins for the Bengals, L'Jarius Sneed for the Kansas City Chiefs, and Kyle Duggar, who was placed under the transition tag for the New England Patriots. That's the grand total of 9. It is not a great thing necessarily to be placed under the franchise tag, but it is not a detriment at the same time as well. It is the franchise, as Donnie said, saying we want to keep you here. Maybe that's in good faith. Maybe that's to rework a contract and not let that player talk to 31 other NFL organizations and try to find his true market value, but still work to a long-term contract extension. And that's another key point of this. Josh Allen, a sensational edge rusher for Jacksonville. For a Jags defense that largely struggled last year, he is a cornerstone of it. Maybe you don't know the name Brian Burns as much as a Nick Bosa or a Myles Garrett or some of the other great edge rushers in the National Football League like a TJ Watt. But I'm telling you, look at the numbers in the production. Brian Burns is right up there. Maybe it's because he has played for the Carolina Panthers the last few years and the struggles Carolina has had. So, Donnie, for these guys who are cornerstones of their organization on that side of the football, it is paramount that if you really want to keep them, if you want to make them still that main figure in your franchise, you don't just franchise tag them, you rework a long-term contract extension, because otherwise they could play under the tag this year, they could hold out They could rework a short-term deal, but that pretty much means that when next year comes to a close, they're walking into free agency.
Yeah, and most people would say, like, boy, you should be happy as a defensive end or an outside linebacker, let's just say, getting tagged for $25 million guaranteed for next season. That's fantastic. That's not the way the players look at it, because they know what their worth actually is on the open market. So they say, boy, my bank account this year should have $100 million guaranteed, and I'm only getting 25 in there. And what happens if I blow out my Achilles or tear my knee up? I'm never going to see that money I actually should have had here. But also we have to keep in mind, this is what's tough about it too. You can't just let good players walk. And we were led to believe that the Carolina Panthers, Ben, we're just going to let Brian Burns walk out the door and say to themselves, like, you know what? We just couldn't come to an agreement and good luck. Nobody's going to do that, because, even if he does find a deal out there, you could trade him. And it doesn't have to be for the first-round draft pick, right? You could say, okay, we'll lift the tag, a second-round pick, we'll take back maybe 2/3 and let you go. You can't have these talented players certainly walk out the door, but also at the same time, take a look at it from the other team's side. Let's just say the Philadelphia Eagles say, you know what, we really want to revamp that defensive line, the New York Giants or the New York Jets. We would love to get Brian Burns in here. Like, if you say it's a first-round draft pick, and let's just say it's a top 10 pick for the Jets, and you say to yourself, okay, well, if we get him as a rookie, as a top 10 pick, we got 5 years here under salary cap management here. We think it's going to be a great player. But it's different for NFL teams now, Ben. You go, okay, wait, I got to give up probably a top 15 pick, then pay this guy like $175 million with $100 million guaranteed. It's not worth it. And that's what the player's frustration is. And I'll leave it at this. The franchise tag doesn't breed goodwill between the player and the franchise. No. So let's just say nothing comes to an agreement. The player doesn't want to lose $25 million. So he holds out till week 6. He's disgruntled and then starts going like, you know what? My ankle doesn't feel so good. I'm going to miss 2 weeks here. Nobody wants disgruntled employees showing up to work. You want them happy, you want them paid, and you want them performing. The franchise tag usually, Ben, is a hindrance on that.
That is very much the case. And often it will be what the franchise is telling that player and his representation. Of course, we saw this last year. The two main running backs, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, tagged. They were going to hold out from training camp. They both reworked a short-term deal following the end of when that time period is, July 15th this year, that you could rework a long-term contract extension. When Lamar Jackson was placed under the franchise tag by Baltimore at this point of the offseason a season ago, Donnie, it was, are any of the other 31 NFL organizations going to go out there and trade for Lamar? Because you can. When they're under the franchise tag, you can go trade for them, but they are not a free agent, not even a restricted free agent. And if you trade for a Brian Burns or a Josh Allen, you would think that you probably rework a long-term contract extension. So those were the 9 guys placed under the franchise tag. How about some notable names that were not? None of the main running backs were placed under the tag. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, nor Austin Eckler. Some wide receivers like Calvin Ridley. We did not have Chris Jones placed under the tag. Kansas City put it on L'Jarius Sneed. That was the expected outcome. As for Chris Jones, it was higher than what even a defensive tackle is set to make under the tag. Baker Mayfield will get to test free agency. And that is the next key date in the NFL offseason calendar. Starting Monday, noon Eastern time, it is when NFL clubs can have contact with free agents around the NFL. Officially, the league year begins on Wednesday, exactly a week from today, Wednesday, March 13th. That's when any contract news we hear becomes official. But we will start to get some of those reports and tweets from the NFL Insiders DRS as early as Monday afternoon, when contact can be made between an NFL organization and a free agent.
That's fantastic. And the first thing I did yesterday, I was, going out, walking the dog, checking the lines here, seeing what we're getting, some of the NFL news. Like, ooh, when does free agency actually start? Expecting to be like 3 weeks away. But the fact that it started up on Monday is fantastic, because you will get offers, and you will get those agreed upon offers on March 11th on Monday. You just have to wait until Wednesday to actually sign those. So it'll be fun to get that started right away. But you brought up some of these players that did not get tagged. They're very good football players, but the running back position certainly diminished. Here's the thing that makes a big difference here. It's the teams that have these players that are choosing not to tag. And outside of Tony Pollard, who last year was on a division-winning team in the Dallas Cowboys, did he perform all that great? No, and he even said it himself. Well, I didn't feel right till like week 10 last year, coming off of that broken leg the year before. But let's take a look at Saquon Barkley. I got news for you here. I know the Giants fans love him at this point. You're going to win 6 games next year with or without Saquon Barkley. There's no way you're tagging that guy, and you shouldn't even be offering a long-term extension because he will be broken down by the time you think you will actually be good. The same thing with Josh Jacobs. He's a really good running back, but not for the Raiders. Again, the Raiders will probably win 6 games next year with or without their running back. Now, if you're saying to yourself, these guys, there's no options, they're hitting free agency, that's not the case here because we always bring up teams like, let's just say DeAndre Swift leads the Philadelphia Eagles and the Eagles think they can make a run at the NFC East. One of those running backs could slide in there perfectly at the right dollar sign. The Buffalo Bills, we've talked about them, it feels like, for years and years. You tell me Saquon Barkley or Jacob shows up on the Buffalo Bills next year, it's not going to make a difference? It absolutely will. Running backs you can't pay on teams that they won't make a difference for. Even Derrick Henry's out there, who you know has tread left on the tires, at least for the next year or two here. Why would he come back to the Tennessee Titans, and why would the Titans pay him? They're going nowhere next year. So a lot of these really good running backs are going to find spots here, and these teams that get them probably going to get a deal, and they can actually help the football team win a championship, unlike the Raiders and the Giants, who are going nowhere next year.
So let's put things into comparable terms just from the financial investment perspective of this all. Last running back to get a long-term contract extension, Nick Chubb, now nearly 3 years ago. Dalvin Cook was cut last year by the Minnesota Vikings. We were all blown away. 4 straight seasons as a Pro Bowler. 4 straight seasons with at least 13 games played. 4 straight seasons with at least 1,100 yards on the ground. He was a free agent for a very long time, signing with the New York Jets during training camp for a 1-year deal worth $5.8 million guaranteed. Of course, that did not work out. But that is probably what a Saquon Barkley or a Derrick Henry or even an Austin Eckler is going to get. Maybe with the same team that is going to let them test free agency, but elsewhere around the National Football League. You see Chris Jones, who will become a free agent. No tag, as our producers like to make that inside joke. But I do believe Kansas City will look to rework and restructure a long-term contract extension with him. Let's go to the name at the top of this board, Donnie. Do you believe Baker Mayfield will be playing in Tampa Bay as the Buccaneers' starting quarterback next season?
1,000%. And that's probably the reason why they didn't slap that tag on. But also keep in mind as well, if you're starting the quarterback position, Ben, on a franchise tag around $40 million, the minute you put that franchise tag down, you have to account for that money. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading into free agency are like, you know what? We think there's a really good chance he's coming back, but I can't slap $40 million on him and say, oh, no, we have to be salary cap compliant right away here, and I got to cut players hoping that we can renegotiate this thing. There's enough goodwill in that building where he wants to come back, they want to sign him, they'll just have to figure out a deal, but you can't tie up that salary cap. It's the same thing that you talk about with Chris Jones. We know Chris Jones wants to be a Chief, and the Chiefs want him back, but you can't slap that tag down where it's like $30 million for him and say, all right, now let's hit free agency. You can't do that here. You have to be smart and sensible, and a lot of these organizations did that. But for Baker Mayfield, I can't see him going anywhere but Tampa Bay, Ben.
Completely agree. That's the really interesting part about Baker Mayfield, who was brought in last year, of course, led the Bucs to a divisional title, led Tampa Bay to an NFL playoff victory as well. When he signed with Tampa, 1-year deal worth $4 million that could be up to about $8.5 million based on incentives. Donnie said what the franchise tag number was for quarterbacks, pretty close to $40 million. Tampa doesn't want to do that. They might have a long-term deal in place for Baker Mayfield, but it's not going to be for that amount of money fully guaranteed in terms of the cap space hit for this upcoming season. So it's all of the financial maneuvering that goes into the franchise tag window or letting a player walk to free agency that might not be a truly free agent when all is said and done, and the league year begins exactly 1 week from today. We'll check in on the API Arnold Palmer Invitational up next. The Lakers lose by double digits last night on the road in Phoenix against the Suns. The Suns get their first victory following the All-Star break, winning by 10 in covering.
Anthony Davis played 42 minutes in that game. LeBron James played 37 minutes in a loss. This is the same thing. It's like repeating this over and over and over. Sure, do you want to win these basketball games? Yes, but you sort of say to yourself, all right, at what cost do we have?
The early line. only on SportsGrid. The Bostonian versus the Book.
In the Big Ten, it's the same thing. No offense to you guys. This feels like the Penn State rule. This feels like this is the guaranteed Penn State to get in.
We need to find a way to let them in because they can't beat Michigan. They can't beat Ohio State. But if we make them a third,
they get in.
Third,
this is the Penn
always
State
going to
rule.
be better than the West half.
Yep.
That 1 year that Lightning in a Bottle catches on the West half, we'll let them in too because they'll bring people.
The Bostonian versus the Book.
The books are treating the Celtics 4 points better at minimum than maybe every single team in the NBA. And so far, I believe they've covered every game since the break.
The Celtics' strict goal here, anything less than a finals appearance and a finals championship is going to be a failure for the Celtics. They got all the pressure in the world across the board here.
Game time decisions only on SportsGrid.
Laying points on the road in college basketball is an absolute landmine. I would not do it. I won't do it the rest of the year. I'm done doing that because it just consistently loses.
I mean, 3 possessions in a 9-point game in which the opposition now is the clock, not the actual team you're facing, right?
Right.
And these guys are taking up shots. I mean, it's just like, that's why it's the NBA.
In-game live, prime time, only on SportsGrid. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid, your 24/7 sports wagering network. The early line.
Magical and historic season in Lincoln, Nebraska continues.
He is the best player in the NBA, but also in the biggest moments where the national media is watching.
Newswire.
Something that we have never seen happen before with one of the iconic coaches in the game.
Pharrell, coast to coast.
The team covers. It's automatic. It's every time. Not sometimes. It's every time.
Game time decisions.
Luka is actually far more dangerous from 3 on the road this year than at home.
This game here tonight, you may want to consider taking as many points as humanly possible.
In-game live, prime time.
We got not 1, but 2 coaches fired systems in place.
Sports Rage
This
late
sort
night.
of has letdown written all over it. It's going to be hard to match the emotion that they played with the other night.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Rounding out this opening hour live right here on the early line, it is a Wednesday all across the SportsGrid network. He is Donnie right side. I am Ben Stevens. If it is Wednesday, that means tomorrow begins a new week on the PGA Tour, a special week at the place of the king, the Arnold Palmer Invitational, the API at Bay Hill Country Club down in Florida. A special venue, a special tournament to honor a legend on the PGA Tour and a very big field that matches the stage of this event. DRS, I know you spoke with Keith Stewart yesterday previewing this event, the API this week. Scotty Scheffler enters as the favorite, plus 650, $2.50 in front of Rory McIlroy at 9-1. Before we get a drop off to Xander Schauffele with a 16-1 number, who did Keith Stewart like in the Arnold Palmer Invitational?
I believe we were hyping up Rory McIlroy with a bad week the week before entering into this tournament. And also, I know who he did like, I don't believe, is Victor Hovland at this point. Hasn't played great golf at all in the stretch. And even Joe Ranieri was piling on Victor Hovland yesterday, calling him, I think he's on a milk carton. Has anybody found his game yet at this point? So I know this tournament's certainly going to be up in the air. But the one thing I always find myself being interested by is Scotty Scheffler. Is Scotty Scheffler going to be the favorite of every single tournament, including every single major throughout the rest of the season? Is that just the way it goes?
Ooh, major, I don't know, because we'll have some of the live guys back like a John Rahm, like a Brooks Koepka. By the time we get to the major championships, we're not all that far away from Augusta. You can start to feel the azaleas in bloom just over a month away from the 2024 Masters. It has been an interesting year, though, on the PGA Tour, even in these premier events. The big names haven't really won. It's been the guys deeper down the odds board, those long shots. Jake Knapp playing really good golf 2 consecutive weeks. Something to keep an eye on as you look at betting the Arnold Palmer Invitational at Bay Hill this upcoming week on the PGA Tour. Hour 2 of the early line on this Wednesday starts in less than a minute.